Hey everyone, and welcome back to Creator Coffee Hour. I'm your host, Salman Mahmood, and this week I spoke to the co-founder and CTO of Atomic.Finance, Matt Black. Atomic.Finance is Matt's third startup and is focused on the exciting world of decentralized finance and specifically creating financial tools and applications within Bitcoin. Throughout this episode, we tend to use some cryptocurrency-related jargon, so because of that, I've included some definitions and information if any of you get confused about certain topics or terms brought up today. My interview with Matt details the greatest lessons he learned from his first two startups, the importance of starting with why, having true conviction and belief in your ideas, as well as how he raised over $3 million in seed capital. If you've been enjoying the episode so far, please leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts and hit that follow button if you're listening on Spotify. If you haven't already, subscribe to our direct feed on Substack to receive our episodes before anyone else through the link in our Instagram bio. Anyways, let's jump into it. Thanks so much for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And I guess that, the first thing that we kind of dig into is, just give me a bit of a brief background on like where you're from. Again, you're coming from BC, and then your educational background, and then leading to some of the products you've worked on.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess a bit of background on me. I'm from BC, so I'm actually from not from Vancouver, from a small town on Vancouver Island, about three hours north of Victoria. So, I grew up there, a small town, about the valley's about like 60,000 people. And so it's a very, very small town vibe. I guess the community is very, very connected. I was always, back in the day, I was always interested in kind of, programming and development. I remember when I was in grade 7, going on different websites and just like right clicking and inspecting the element and, looking at the HTML and CSS code there. So I was just always interested in like kind of like programming and development, from way back. And then I think like a little bit later on, it was actually kind of similar to what I'm working on now. It was actually my dad that actually got me into Bitcoin. So he's kind of like this, I guess you'd call it like maybe an anarchist, doesn't trust the government, has gold underneath his bed type thing. And so Bitcoin was kind of like the perfect kind of tool for him to be able to, kind of hedge against, the government fucking up, so, which is perfect. And so that's how I got interested in Bitcoin back in the day. I actually didn't, I was just kind of playing around with it back there, trading it here and there. Didn't really do much with it back in in 2014. And was mostly just like more interested in like kind of entrepreneurship and building things to solve problems for people. It wasn't until a few years later that I actually got back into Bitcoin and kind of what I'm working on now.
So like even touching on, where you're from and the community you surrounded yourself with leading into your first venture, like can I speak to that kind of how that community kind of helped you get into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea itself for like kind of the I guess the business that I was interested in creating was really just to solve a problem. So it was, I was sitting there in class in high school, grade 12, and I wasn't listening to the announcements. No one else around me was listening to the announcements. Everyone's sitting there, just reading on their phone essentially. And I realized, why can't we get announcements on our phone? Like, why isn't there a way for us to be able to, everyone's on their phone anyway. Why can't I just get notifications rather than need to like read a piece of paper? And so I started this idea called just an app called Anotiv, allowed for like administrator to put like announcements and send notifications to students, letting them know like kind of what's happening, whether you're in grade 8 or you're in grade 12. I got started with We Are YQQ. It's basically it's not really an incubator, but just like a community of like businesses. It's called it's in a place. I used to live in a place called like the Comox Valley. So it's for businesses in the Comox Valley. Like whether you're like a local coffee shop or you're an entrepreneur trying to create a business. Like they just try to bring everyone together and kind of figure out like resources that can help everyone out. So, if you're someone who's starting a business and you need graphic design, well, there's someone in the community that can help you with that. Or if you need help with development, well, there's someone, that can help you with that. And so that's kind of how I got, and the way that I got connected with them actually was I was working on on this Anotiv project and just really trying to get into various schools, et cetera, et cetera. And I got connected with kind of the head of like We Are YQQ, and he said, well, you should be part of like the community, and you should be part of the discussions. Like, let's see like how we can help you and how you can help everyone else as well. And so I just started getting connected with that community, and I think it's really great to be connected with different like entrepreneurs, like no matter where you live, because you'll learn like a lot of things. Like, so that was my first like opportunity just to like kind of network with kind of fellow like-minded people that were working on cool things. And so and yeah, I think like it really taught me just the importance of like I guess networking and meeting like fellow founders and just like learning like of their experiences and like what can go wrong or what should you watch out for. Like those are just essential things that when you're starting out you're just not going to know.
With Anotiv, you're a student going into organizations, whether it be schools. I'm not sure what other organizations you worked with, whether it be nonprofits and such as well. But going in and actually pitching your product, especially at such a young age, like how did you go about that? And did you have anyone to kind of lean on in those types of circumstances to kind of learn from?
When I was creating Anotiv, like way back then, it was I of course just started at my own like high school, so it was a situation where hey, I want to solve a problem. I knew everyone at the school. I knew everyone there. And so going in there and saying, kind of pitching it to like the administrators there saying, hey, like we should have this, hey, I'm building this app that will like solve this problem. It would be really great if, like we could implement it and have students, utilize it. And so I basically just, pitched it to the administrator and then, they started using it. So that was the first step, right? It was kind of like, hey, like what's the initial community that you can start with that you can really push out this product to. After that, once that kind of got established and I had a bunch of people using it, then I actually worked on like actually talking to other schools and working on getting kind of the program into them into their schools. So I think like one thing that I was a bit naive with at the time, like being like an early entrepreneur, is like I think you really need to understand what is your like initial like target segment that you really want to focus on. And in that instance, with something like Anotiv, I was essentially just trying to go out and solve a problem for myself. I think one thing that I could have done like a lot better is actually gone and done a lot more market research. So, going and talking to administrators, talking to teachers, talking about like, what are the challenges that they run into? Because I came to this from a perspective of like, hey, I'm a student and I want to solve a problem for myself. And here's how I want to get that information, but not necessarily thinking about like, what systems do they have in place already? And do they want to change those systems? And so I think that's one thing I could have done a lot better. Regardless, my naive self, I still went out and, talked to all these different schools and basically just, try to pitch them on like, hey, you can get like announcements to your students, get more engagement. Here's what we can provide. Some of them actually did go and like implement it, but it was a very difficult road to kind of getting any of them to use it. And even when they did start using it, it was kind of very limited. And so to be honest, on my end, I really should have done more market research. And I think in general, like if you're creating a startup, like you need to be doing it full time. Like I was just doing it kind of as a side project on the side and kind of learning in the process. It was really for me to be able to learn like how to program an app, create an iOS app and an Android app, and then push it out there and see if people liked it. But I think like if you're really doing a startup, you need to do your market research and you need to be doing it full time. Otherwise, it's really just going to be a side project, which is really what Anotiv was at the end of the day. Yeah.
But were you okay with that, like in the moment, with it just being a side project? Like, what did you think the capabilities of this project really was? Like, did you think of it kind of big scale, or you're kind of like, oh, this is a problem, and it'd just be kind of cool to solve it, rather than thinking of it as a segment of your kind of entrepreneurial journey, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, at the time, I definitely thought of it being a lot more, and I even got approached. Like there was an investor in Comox that kind of approached me, willing to give just a little bit of funding to like get the idea started. And I obviously was thinking very big at the time. I was thinking, hey, it'd be really great if this could be implemented in a significant number of schools, and this can be helping students to like learn how to or just helping students to pay more attention to what's going on in their community and what's happening within the school body. And so that's what I was really interested in is getting this into as many schools as possible. I think at the time I didn't know that much about ed tech. And I also think I was thinking a little bit too broad. I was thinking of like, hey, this can be a generic announcements platform. Whereas what I really should have been focusing on is more what is the specific target segment that I can start on and like really, really nail down and then grow from there. And so for me, I was obviously thinking like, very large, and I did not think of it as a side project. Looking back, like, I've learned a lot like kind of since those days. So I mean, there's a lot of like, learnings and a lot of things I can look back on and say like, hey, I could have done this a lot better. And one way I think you can do that is by like reading a lot and like learning from like other entrepreneurs that have gone like through these things. Learn from, read the books of like, what Sam Walton did with Walmart, what Jeff Bezos did with Amazon, and what they really focused on and how they grew their businesses, to figure out like like what I could have done better back in the day. But I mean, yeah, at the time I was thinking big, but at the end of the day, it was like, in hindsight, it was a side project.
Talking hindsight, I guess, like you've had a lot of early experiences that I think have impacted your entire journey, like starting with Anotiv. You went to the global finals in Tennessee. Was that right?
That's right. That's right. I don't know if
Yeah.
do you guys have like Destination Imagination here in Ontario?
I'm not aware of it. I've never heard of that before, so I'm not 100%
Oh,
sure.
okay. Yeah, it's essentially a program for a program for teaching like students like creativity. So if you want to get and as a high school student, like if you want to get better at your public speaking ability, or even being able to do improv or think on the spot, like it really tries to like teach you how to do those things. So what they do is they give out these challenges each year, basically like learn how to like they give it like a challenge. It can be like scientific, it can be more technical. Like they have different challenges. Some of them are improv challenges, and you just choose one of them. And throughout the rest of the school year, you basically focus on that challenge. So I remember one year, one of the challenges was create these cars that are like 6 inches in length, and use a bunch of different like propulsions to like hit the be able to go from like point A to point B, basically. So you can use like gravity, you can use like electric, like et cetera, et cetera. And then the other thing that they get you to do as well is to also you have to perform like basically a story about like what you're working on. And so that teaches like a couple things. It teaches public speaking. And so what we were doing at the time is I learned a lot about like kind of improving my public speaking ability. I started in grade 8, and I was kind of the shy grade 8 going to high school. And by grade 12, I was much more comfortable and like much more comfortable public speaking. And so I think that's what really like DI was really great for, is like, teaching me kind of those public speaking skills. Now, Anotiv was actually done as part of a DI project, and it was kind of a way to force myself to say, hey, here's this challenge for DI that I want to do, which is do something like that's good in your community. That was one of the challenges. And for me, it was, hey, what if I can help like the student body at the school? And it was a great forcing function, because it was like, hey, this challenge, you need to go present at the regional competition in February. You need to get you either get this app done, or like you don't go to the competition. So it was a great forcing function to say, hey, you need to go and you need to learn like iOS development and Android development in the next like 3 months, or else like this isn't happening. So so I kind of did that as part of the school project, and then later on thought of like, hey, maybe I can expand this into like a real business. Yeah.
Like, what would you say out of all your early experiences, which one would be your favorite? And I think you spoke about DI and the impact that had on you, but what exactly did your favorite early experience kind of teach you about entrepreneurship and building a business?
I guess early experience. I guess Anotiv was really kind of the first one, and I think it really um, taught me a few things. Like you might have an idea. So I think one thing that it really taught me was that whenever you're thinking of like creating a business, the technical problem, like technically how to solve it. So like how do you bring announcements to students? Okay, well that's easy. You just create an app. You you create the server on the back end, and you like push notifications to them. Okay, well that's how you technically solve that problem. But I think what it taught me is that like even if the technical solution to a problem is very simple, the actual execution is a lot harder. And you really need to know like what target you're segmenting, and like who you're really solving a problem for before you go out and solve that. Because anyone can go and build like back in the day, if you wanted to technically if you wanted to build Facebook, it probably wasn't that hard. You go and you spin up a server and you allow people to go on there. But the harder problem was, how do you get users utilizing that product? And so I think that's one thing that that kind of doing Anotiv really taught me, is that like you can build it, but but they won't necessarily come. So, some people take the approach of build it and they will come, but that's not always the case. And so I think it really taught me like the importance of like I guess the business side of things, and really thinking about like all aspects of the business rather than just like the technical aspect, which happens to be my background.
Okay, and then how would you say that kind of impacted your next venture with Starspeak in terms of your approaching that problem solve kind of mentality and looking outwards at who your users would be? How did that kind of impact that process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it helped me realize that having having a co-founder that does, I guess handles the business side of things. I know that's a meme, but handles like that side of the business was, I think, something that was very important for me, because I think my core competency are very like technical. So if I want to go out and build something, like I can do that. But always thinking about kind of the business side of things, and how who's the customer, what's the product we're building, who are we solving a problem for. That really helped me, kind of bringing on, like, I think, like, working with Dan Mall, who is my co-founder for Starspeak. Like he really helped me to kind of like ground and really think about those things. And it was really great working with him, because it was kind of a situation where we would sit down and we would talk about the product, and we talk about like the customer, and we would talk about who are we solving a problem for. So with Starspeak, what we were doing is we actually did this as part of a competition. It was the tech under 20, I think, competition. And we just came up with an idea, which was, hey, like, to be honest, like I had a lot of problems with public speaking, when I was younger. What if we can enable a way to allow for, like, students to be able to more effectively public speak, and what are the ways that we can kind of solve this problem? And we realized that there really weren't that many things out there. Like, obviously there's Toastmasters, but there really isn't any, like, tools that someone can just, open up a web browser and just learn how to more effectively public speak. And so, we were like, hey, what if we were able to, effectively, teach students how to public speak, and allow them to, like, learn more effectively over time. And if we can track all that information using machine learning, and we can give them like accurate results on, like, what their public speaking ability is, then maybe we can make a really great impact here. So that's kind of where we started with Starspeak. And obviously, like, it was difficult to get started from like a technical perspective, but it was always also really great, for me, like, realizing, hey, if I can have a co-founder that is able to really focus on that side of the business, then we make a really good duo. And me concentrating on the technical side and him concentrating on the business side of things, like, you really need someone that, like, really complements your skills. And I think that's something really important to find in a co-founder, if you're starting a business.
And then something that I realize is a recurring theme here is that with Anotiv and Starspeak, we kind of, the spark of the project, although obviously there's a problem that you found and you had to solve, but the kind of spark of the project kind of starting is a competition or something else that's kind of external. Do you think that boundary really kind of helped? And a lot of the time what young entrepreneurs face, like one of the largest problems they face is like action, right? They think of all these ideas, but it's all coming to action, actually putting them into the world and actually starting it, right? So do you think being a part of these competitions, being a part of DI, that really helped propel you to move forward? Any advice to young entrepreneurs to kind of create those boundaries so that they, focus on action and less so on kind of thought process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends if you think you're more of like a technical founder, or or business founder, or if you're both. So, like, for me, like, I think, like, as a more of a technical founder, like, going to if you're not going to hackathons, like, you should be. And obviously it's a little harder now, like, during COVID. But things will go back to normal, and obviously there still are, like, lots of hackathons happening. I think those really helped me. Like, I used to go to a ton back in the day. Hack the North, or MHacks, and those were really great because we would always, like, sit there and we would brainstorm all these ideas, even during, like, the school year, right? So, like, when I went to I was in the double degree program at Waterloo and Laurier, and so, like, even during the school year when we were just working on our courses, I'd be talking to people about this idea or that idea. And I think hackathons are just a really great, opportunity to say like, hey, we're going for the weekend, like, to wherever place, where it's Waterloo, we're sleeping on the floor, you wake up and you keep coding. And it's just like a really good forcing function for like forcing you to go out and actually, just go and like build that idea or think about that idea. So I think those are really good for like forcing functions for people. If there's like I think on the business side, like, I mean, you probably have more experience with that, let's say like JDCC, like thinking about like different business ideas and like how to solve them. So I think it really depends on what type of like founder you think you are, and just finding those opportunities to really like, force yourself to think about, what are the problems that I see around me? What problems do I experience? And then just actually going out there and doing it, saying, hey, I'm taking the weekend and I'm doing this hackathon, or I'm taking the weekend and I'm learning this new thing. I think that's really, really essential. So yeah, definitely check out hackathons.
That on its own shows the importance of seizing opportunity, like any different opportunity that comes towards you, because especially when you're young, because they are, as you said, forcing functions for growth, for learning, not only, let's say, as an entrepreneur, but also just from development perspective in terms of what you want to do when you exit university, in terms of developing skills and with numbers, just developing skills with strategy, developing skills with marketing, those different types of things. Whether it's on the more kind of technical side with hackathons, or even stuff like case competition, solving kind of business problems, those are kind of forcing functions for you to grow. And I think, again, it goes back to how important it is for us to be seizing opportunities when we're young in order to achieve that growth. And so, yeah, we've spoken about Anotiv, we've spoken about Starspeak, which were two great, I say, first ventures for someone so young. Let's talk about, your experience at UW and the people you're around and your co-ops. First, why did you pick UW? And we can kind of delve into your co-op experiences as well, if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny, why did I choose UW? Well, I was obviously very interested in like, like programming and development and stuff. And I'd been, kind of doing some development since I was in, grade 7 at school. And so obviously, it was either, I could have gone to UBC, I guess, and been a bit closer to home. But for me, like I always, I knew that, Waterloo was well known for computer science. And so, it was kind of a, no brainer for me. I really wanted to go there. It was funny though, like as I was, while I was still in high school, like building a Anotiv, I mean, I recall like, literally telling my mom like, oh yeah, like I don't want to go, like I'm just gonna work on a Anotiv and build it into a business and all this stuff. And I think, and obviously like later on, like I dropped out and and that was fine. But I think for anyone like thinking of like not going to university, like it's fine if you drop out, like at least go like your first year, because I think you'll meet some really, really great people that you might not have met if you didn't go. So I'm very like grateful that my mom like kind of forced me to go, rather than just like becoming an entrepreneur, like right there with a Anotiv, because I've learned obviously a lot since. So I ended up going to Waterloo. I was in the double degree program, like computer science and business, because that's really the things that I was interested in, which was obviously the business side of things, like creating a startup, which is kind of what I was trying to do with Anotiv at the time, and obviously the computer science piece of it. And so I was to be honest, like coming from a really like small town, there was literally 3 people from my high school that went to Waterloo, and none of them were doing computer science. I think there was literally 2 other people at my high school that went into computer science. And I know there's a lot, that's a lot more common here in Toronto. In like a small town, it's not as popular. Not that many people are doing it, and it's a very different feel. So just being able to come to Waterloo and be around like-minded people was such a and Laurier as well, like being able to be around those people was such a change for me, and such a nice nice experience. Being able to just stay up to late hours of the night, like talking about like random ideas or this startup idea or this thing. It's the best experiences. And so yeah, I really enjoyed my time at Waterloo and Laurier. And I know you asked as well about the co-ops. My first co-op was actually with Shopify, which at the time it was interesting. Like me and Dan Mall had already kind of thought of Starspeak at the time and what we wanted to build with that. And then, out of the blue, I got a last minute offer at Shopify. And so it was this like, kind of heart wrenching thing where it was a decision of like, hey, do I want to stick with the job like I've got here in Waterloo? I was actually going to be working at just a startup that was down in Kitchener, and and then on the side, like of course, like really focused on Starspeak, or do I want to go and take this opportunity at Shopify and which is like like a dream for a lot of people for their first co-op. And so I went with Shopify, for better or worse. Shopify is a really great company, and they really try to get people to really learn how to. They really encourage entrepreneurship, so like being an entrepreneur like within the company. But to be honest, like my time there, like I always felt like a cog in the wheel. Like I always felt like I want to be doing my own thing. And not that a lot of people don't enjoy their job at Shopify and people don't enjoy their job at bigger companies. Like, but that was just me, like I always wanted to be going and doing my own thing. And so it was a really great experience for me to try that out and you learn what it was like there. But and on the side, of course, we were working on Starspeak. But I think like really, being apart from Dan Mall, like I was in Ottawa, he was in Waterloo. I would drive all the way back from Ottawa to Waterloo like on the weekends, and that's a long ways, to do that. And I think that really slowed us down in terms of like our development. And so I think like for my recommendation for that is that if you're like an entrepreneur and you've got like a co-founder, like make sure you're in the same place. Like it's really important for like the initial like founding team to be in the same place at the same time. So yeah, but it was fun.
So you said how working at Shopify kind of confirmed your kind of belief that yeah, of course it's great, it's great, that's some people's dream to like work for a big company and stay with that company and continue to grow with them. But you knew that wasn't for you. Do you think that was something that was realized way earlier, starting with Anotiv, or and it was just confirmed at Shopify? Or did you, going into that internship, did you think, okay, maybe I could do this, like maybe I could work for Shopify and maybe I could work in the tech industry and not be a founder? When was that kind of click for you?
At the time I was always thinking, I mean, of course, like going there initially, I thought maybe I could work here like long term. And I also, and I think Shopify is a much more entrepreneur minded like place, like, compared to other like corporations. It doesn't have that corporate culture. It really, does try to have like an open culture. And so I thought, maybe this is somewhere I could work. And then I think just being there, and funny enough, I actually did 2 terms at Shopify. So so I came back, and I mean, after the first term, I thought, maybe this is somewhere I could come back to and, maybe do another internship. But it was always kind of wary in my mind, and I was unsure about it. The second time, I was actually a lot, I really found my calling more. I was doing a lot more kind of crypto and, Bitcoin related things during my second internship at Shopify. And there, I think it really just confirmed for me, hey, I had an okay time, the first time doing an internship there. The second time, like, it was really kind of a realization that, I want to be able to go and like, solve problems myself. I want to go and build something that I truly believe in, like I believe can change the world. I don't want to be working on like, one piece of the pie and like kind of a larger organization. So I think I realized like, I think I realized, a little bit from the first internship and a little bit from the second as well.
So for me, looking at you, right? I'm just kind of curious of your opinion on this. Do you think entrepreneurs, that's just kind of like a born mentality to become an entrepreneur? Or do you think that's something that can be curated? In terms of those two things, like where do you think you kind of fit in? Because I think for me, looking at you, one, starting in web development, like I feel like you were destined to kind of do something on your own, right? Eventually in one way or another. Like the way you're getting involved, the way you're putting yourself into these kind of forcing functions to have to push yourself to create these businesses. Do you think going through those things, like, do you think that you have to be born kind of that way, or do you think someone can develop and kind of become an entrepreneur?
So I think, so for myself, I think I was always, I think to be honest, I was always destined to be an entrepreneur, but I don't think that's necessarily the case for everyone. And I think a really good example of that is my co-founder. So, when he was in high school, he was like the good, the good student, getting like, yeah, obviously, getting like some of the highest marks in the class. And he was, he went to Waterloo, and he was always expecting to kind of do like get to a 9 to 5 job and get a really secure job. And that was always the vision that he had. And then I come along, and I wouldn't shut up about Bitcoin to him. And now he's doing a startup with me. And so I think it really depends. Like some people are, like for myself, like I'm always like, I always like new ideas and building things. And so I always felt like, entrepreneurship was the path for me, but it definitely wasn't for him. He like when we started, it was just me and him, and we both came from like more like technical backgrounds. And I just happened to have more experience with like the specific domain we were working in. And so he ended up taking on more of the business side of things. And at first, like that was really new to him, and really like uncomfortable, I think. And what he did over the course of like, the past, like the transformation that he's gone through over the past like 2-3 years has been like, just phenomenal in terms of like the amount, like, and I think that was because he's done a lot of reading, and really and done a lot of networking, and just gone through the process of like really learning what it is to be like an entrepreneur and how to change your mindset. And so I think that's, I don't think you necessarily, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you don't need to be born that way. You don't need to be a person who's like done all these experiences that I have. I think my co-founder is like a perfect example of that not happening and still being a really great, and still being really driven to, build something. It's really about, wanting to solve a problem and like having, conviction about a certain vision of like where is the world going over the next few years, and what is your, impact going to be in that, and what problem can you solve for people, in that. And so yeah, I'd say he's a perfect example of that not being the case.
That's kind of like where I'm at, kind of sitting on that fence there. But yeah, you can kind of see stories going both ways, and I think they're inspirational leaders and founders who come from both sides of the coin, I'd say. Let's kind of lead, I guess, into originally Atomic Loans, now Atomic Finance. I know a bit of the backstory about how you started and how you met Tony, but how about you again talk about, how you kind of had that problem and how you kind of thought of fixing it, and, how that kind of happened? Because I think it's an interesting idea.
Yeah. So like we were always, so I mean, before we even got started, doing kind of Atomic Loans, we were doing, I first like went to the first time I actually got back into crypto. So I first had gotten into crypto like back in 2013, 2014, just because my dad had introduced me into it. And he was like, hey, like I want to put some money in Bitcoin. He knows nothing about, he's not a technical guy at all. And so I was just kind of, trading for him, like allowing him to buy Bitcoin. And I got back into the space because of a hackathon that was happening at Waterloo. It was like, it was the Ethereum hackathon that was going on. And, the founder of Ethereum was in town, Vitalik, of course, went to Waterloo. And I just went to that hackathon. I saw, it was just amazing to see kind of what was happening, what had happened in the industry, and like the 4 years that I had been out of it. And so that's what kind of clicked for me, saying like, hey, this is some really amazing technology that's being built. I want to create something here, like I want to get more into this. And I already obviously believed in like the vision of what was happening in crypto, but I just wanted to get back in the game. And so we started experimenting, like trying to think about like, what were the different like problems like people were running into. At the time, like I was doing an internship at Shopify. And so me and Tony, literally, like I was his roommate, he was working at Manulife actually. And so, we would do our 9 to 5 like internship. And then we would come back, we would have supper. And then like the rest of the night, we would just be like coding and like working on various things like in crypto, and just like learning about different stuff. Like I remember we literally like, we were trying to think of like, hey, how can this like decentralized like blockchain like solve problems for people? How can we solve like intermediation? We literally wrote up a white paper on like, decentralized Uber, which like, in hindsight is like a ridiculous idea. But and so it wasn't until actually that we were and it just really came from like a need of us like wanting to learn more about this. So we were doing our internships, and then after that I decided to say, hey, I really want to jump more into this industry. I want to build more. I want to like learn like what are the biggest problems that people are running into. So I ended up getting an internship at Consensus. So I actually took a term off school, did an internship at Consensus, and it was during my time there that I really learned about like I started working on what's called atomic swaps. So it's basically the idea of being able to swap between one cryptocurrency and another. So in our case, it was like swapping between Bitcoin and Ethereum. And it was, and I really enjoyed like that development work. And so I decided to do another internship at Consensus, take another, another, block off school. And it was at that time that me and Tony were like, hey, you know what? Consensus has an office in Toronto. We really want to be there with like the rest of the team. We want to be connecting with more like-minded people. We at the time I was just working at the Waterloo office, and there really wasn't that many people that were kind of thinking about like the type of like development that we wanted to do. And so we decided to move to Toronto. And at the time, like obviously we were kind of fiat poor because we'd been paying for school and whatnot. And but we had some Bitcoin saved up. And so we were in a situation where we're like, hey, we don't want to sell our Bitcoin. Our landlord wants 6 months rent up front. What if we could just like access the value of that Bitcoin without selling it? And the only ways that we could do that is if we gave our Bitcoin, to a custodian. So there's these services out there, and they provide Bitcoin-backed loans. And what they do is they take your Bitcoin and then they give you a loan, but the Bitcoin is in their custody the whole time. Now, I had a bad experience with like custodians taking my Bitcoin back in 2014, 2015, because I was managing my dad's funds, and we had put a small amount of it, 10%, on an exchange called Crypsy. And a year later, the owner of that exchange, got up and left, right? Like the money was gone. And, I think we were part of some lawsuit, some class action against the guy. Nothing ever got resolved. And it's just an important thing to know in Bitcoin is like, if once it's gone, it's gone. You're never getting that back. There's no going to your bank or, and trying to figure out like, try to solve the problem. It's gone forever. And so, I was very wary at the time about like, taking on a Bitcoin backed loan using custodian. We thought, hey, we're working on this interesting swapping technology between Bitcoin and Ethereum. What if we could build a product that allowed for people to be able to access the value of their Bitcoin without going and selling it, taking out a Bitcoin backed loan, just like people take out a mortgage. It's like, why can't I do this with Bitcoin? And so that's what like actually started us thinking about atomic loans. We wanted to solve a problem for ourselves, which was this: we want to access the value of our Bitcoin. But like, and people had already been thinking about this problem as well. Like people in Ethereum, there was already Ethereum-backed loans that exist. There's already solutions out there that allow you to put in Ethereum as collateral and get access to a loan in what's called a stable coin and just be able to use that in your daily life. But this didn't exist for Bitcoin yet. And so that's really where Atomic Loan started, is us wanting to bring this technology that existed for Ethereum and that existed centralized in a centralized manner with Bitcoin, and wanting to bring it to Bitcoin.
And when was this? In later 2018 or early 2019?
I think it was it was the fall of 2018 that we were really thinking of this problem, when we actually ended up moving to Toronto and really thinking of like how to build this idea. And it was interesting too, because we were interns at Consensus, which is a very Ethereum focused company, and I was obviously working on swaps at the time, and we really liked where this idea was going, and so we actually ended up pitching to the team that I was interning for, for like funding and whatnot, and for it to be incorporated as part of the product, and they ended up turning us down. We went to YC and we pitched the idea. They turned us down, and so it's this process of like, hey, we think this is a really, really great idea. We want to go and work on this full time. I think we should like look for funding to like work on this. And so we pitched to those two. Then finally, Consensus was actually having like basically a pitch competition, for funding new ideas, because every kind of quarter they brought in like new ideas and tried to like fund new companies for that. And so we participated in the pitch competition there, and pitched the idea of being able to basically be able to access the liquidity that exists in Bitcoin and being able to do that in Ethereum. And they really loved the idea and ended up giving us the initial kind of pre-seed funding to really start working on it full time.
Honestly, looking at it, I think it's a great idea, but like you in the moment, right? What kind of gave you the validation for this idea to kind of know that, okay, yeah, this is good enough. I want this to be my full-time gig at the time. Like versus like Anotiv and Starspeak, obviously, though, I feel like those are kind of more primitive and smaller ideas. But looking here, like what gave you that validation to be like, yeah, this is it. I want to turn this into full-time.
Yeah, I think it was the realizations. I always had I was very fond of like like cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, and just the idea of like replacing like the existing like financial system. I think part of it was actually going to a hackathon in Denver that I went in back in February of 2018. I met some guys there that basically introduced me to. I don't know if you've probably seen the movie like The Big Short. We literally sat there in the hotel room and watched The Big Short, and then compared this to what was being built and like the new financial system that we wanted to build. And it was kind of a situation of like, hey, like this is like what's being built here in this industry is going to fundamentally change how finance is done. If I want to move money around the world, like there's ridiculous barriers that exist for doing so in the existing financial system. The financial system, the bankers fucked up in 2008. And so like, why can't we build, basically a better financial system? So I think for me, it was partly just being exposed to so many people that had so much conviction of like where this industry was going. And also for myself, like being really, really interested in building something that would really solve problems, not only for myself, but for other people. The other thing that really gave me a lot of conviction for this was, I think it was the timing of everything. So there's a term like that, some viewers might know, it's called, decentralized finance, DeFi. And the idea of it is being able to just build the existing financial tools that exist in the traditional system, but being able to build it in a manner where like anyone can access it from like, just having an internet connection, you can get access to financial tools. And at the time, that there were some initial like protocols that were like in the process of being built that allowed for like those types of things to happen. And those are all being built on Ethereum. And so what we had a lot of conviction about this idea, because we saw that there, on Ethereum, these founders are getting a lot of success for this. The Bitcoin market is even larger. And we're essentially like, we have a unique technical solution to be able to solve this problem and bring it to Bitcoin, where we can access an even larger market. And so that's really where like the conviction came for us. There's those few market signs, and obviously our love of being able to like work in this industry was really where we had the conviction to say like, hey, this is a really great idea. We need to spend the time now to do this. And the other part as well was things were moving fast. Every little while there's like a new protocol that was coming out to like be able to solve a problem, and we realized we can go back to school and we can finish our degree, but we're going to miss this entire industry being built, and we're going to really miss out on that. And so it was a situation where it's like, we need to do this now or we're never going to do this.
I actually know a couple founders in the cannabis industry, and I think it was the same kind of thing where everything's being created now, right? And if we don't start kind of hopping on, getting into this and learning and creating, then by the time we graduate, then the industry will be created and we're going to be left behind. And we're going to be the ones that are going to have to work for other people to work on these types of exciting things. So really interesting and really cool how you recognize that as well. And then kind of moving up, scaling up throughout 2019, I guess. The two things that I really want to talk about, one is your capital raise, because I think you have a really, really cool business. I would say pretty revolutionary to traditional finance in terms of the idea. In terms of the growth and the scale of your business, how did it get to the point where you realized you wanted to raise additional capital and kind of going through that process, I guess?
Yeah, so I mean, we initially, we pitched a consensus for our like our pre-seed investment, and we got 200K from them, and that allowed us to get started, kind of pay our initial salaries and really spend the time to like really develop the protocol. We realized fairly early on that we would need to raise like fairly soon. Obviously 200K only gets you so far, and if you really want to kind of go and build this protocol and bring on like the additional like developers that you need, then we were going to need to raise. And so we actually made in 2018, I believe it was maybe it was 2019. Yeah, it was 2019. So we brought on another developer to really help us be able to go and execute on the protocol. And at the time, we realized, if we want to survive as a business, it's going to take some time to get to to get to profitability essentially. And so we obviously saw that writing on the wall, and essentially what our pre-seed funding got us to is it got us to a point where we said, hey, we've developed like the initial like elements that are involved in the protocol. We can do the initial with every kind of protocol that was being done on Ethereum at the time, you needed to do audits, which were quite expensive. So we did an audit on like the code of the protocol as well. So we knew we would be able to get the initial things like up and running. But if we really wanted to scale this, we knew that we had to raise money. And so at that time, it was just a situation of like, okay, how are we going to figure out how to like, raise a seed round? And neither myself or Tony, we didn't have any experience with this. It was like, we're just like, we're a bunch of like, 20, 21-year-olds that were just like, trying to raise money, trying to create a startup. And so, and it was partly also our existing investors. I mean, like Consensus, helped us with the process as well because they had invested with us at this point, and they also, gave us a lot of advice saying like, hey, like, people are raising right now. If you guys, want to kind of, build for the long term, you're probably going to need to raise like a seed round. You should start thinking about this now. You need to start thinking about raising 6 months ahead of time. Tony in specific, he read a lot of books, learning how to raise, a lot of videos, how to go through this process, talking to people like existing founders about their experience, like going through the raising process. And so that was like incredibly helpful as well. And so basically at the end of like, near the end of 2019, we learned from a lot of people as well, like, from that have gone through YC, that if you really actually want to go and raise a round, like you need to be down in, you need to be down in the valley. Like you need to be in San Francisco, you need to be talking to people, and like meeting with them. And so we actually went and we lived lived out in San Francisco for an entire month. And we didn't really know like what was gonna happen from it. We had heard of founders that had gone down there and they hadn't been successful. And so we got a lot of intros, talked to a lot of people, read a lot of things, and at the end of it, we probably every time, like for every one yes, you get like 10, 20, 30 no's. We talked to lots of VCs, and oftentimes they won't even give you a no. They'll be like, oh, we'll think about it, or like come back to us when you have a lead investor. And so every time you've got to go through all these no's to get to get a yes. And so we had lots of meetings with different investors, and many of them just felt like we weren't the right fit, or they had this problem with what we were doing. And that's a learning process as well, to learn about like what are the how to talk to VCs, how to how to have that conversation. And eventually we finally got a meeting with Initialize, which actually led our seed round. And by that point, we had already been through 3 weeks of like talking to investors and getting no's or maybes. We talked to one of the partners there, and he called a partner meeting, and we pitched to all the partners that Initialized, and we ended up getting our seed funding. But obviously, if you're ever going through a raise process, like make sure you do your research, really talk to existing founders, because that's what really helped us in the end.
Did you decide, okay, yeah, we're jumping in with them right away? Or did you have any kind of gut feeling that you wanted to talk to more VCs after that? Because my kind of question is like knowing when you kind of have a good fit with your financiers. Because obviously, yeah, it's one thing you're going around getting no's all the time. So do you just take that first yes, or do you kind of get the yes and then evaluate fit and then move forward?
Oh, you absolutely need to vet like the investors that you go with. So we I mean, there were some that we actually like, we talked to and we just didn't fit, think we're a good fit for us. So like with Initialize, like specifically, like I think like any investor that you're looking at, cooking in the kitchen with, it's really a question of, like, are they a good fit? Like, so what are their existing like portfolio companies? And, what is kind of like the vision for their fund? So Initialize specifically, like they've invested in Coinbase. They've invested in like a lot of like, larger companies that have been extremely successful, and a lot of companies that are that have gone through YC. And so for them, like it was a process for us, like really just talking to the existing like founders that had got investment from them. So they'd invested in some Ethereum projects, some Bitcoin projects, and one of them in particular, like what was the name of it? Stark. I can't remember. They've since changed names. So anyhow, the founder of that one, they were kind of working on like basically atomic swap like technology, and so I was very close with that founder and really learned from him that kind of what Initialize was like as a as a fund, and how they really supported their entrepreneurs. So I think that's one really important question to ask is like, do they support their entrepreneurs? What resources do they have? They literally have like a media team that like helps, if you're doing like a media release or you're releasing a product, they'll help you through that entire process. You can be connected with all the existing founders that exist in that portfolio. So for us, like, after talking to like a couple founders that had got investment from Initialize, we're like, hey, this is a really great fit. But I think anyone will tell you like if you're in the valley and you're getting investment, like people obviously shop around, see if they can get like a better investment from somewhere, and that's really that might just be for negotiation. So obviously you don't say yes right away. Even though we got some advice from a founder to say yes right away, we negotiated a little bit and actually ended up getting a better valuation for a higher raise essentially, which was great for us. But definitely do your due diligence on investors as well and make sure they're a good fit.
So this is more even just a personal thing. So I love Pomp. Like I love the
Oh
stuff that
yeah.
he puts out on Twitter. I listen to his podcast a lot. I have both his newsletter and his wife's newsletter. Like they put up great content online. What was his involvement in the round? And like, have you ever met him in person?
Yeah. Funny. So funny story with Pomp. So we had just talked to Initialize. We had gone through the partner meeting and we flew back from SF. And then at that time, we were looking like to have some more people like be part of the round essentially. And so we had some angel investors, and obviously Ken's consensus was like reinvesting. And so it was literally a situation where we were thinking of like, hey, on our cap table, like we really want to have someone who has some media presence that can really help us in that arena. And so we actually asked like Initialize. So we asked Gary Tan, who's one of the partners and founders of Initialize, for basically like an intro to Pomp, because we thought, oh hey, here's a guy, Morgan Creek. He's got like great press. He's on TV all the time, for God's sake.
He's the Bitcoin bull, like the Bitcoin bull.
Yeah. He definitely has a really good, and you know what? He serves a really great segment in the Bitcoin community of being able to talk about Bitcoin to like we call them normies, but like people who aren't like Bitcoiners or aren't like hardcore, like people like being able to bring like your average person into Bitcoin and being able to understand why it's important. I think he does a really great job of that. And so we actually got an intro from Gary Tan to Pomp. He literally got on the phone with us. We had one call. He like asked us a few questions, and then he's like, "Yeah, I'm in." Like he's like, "Okay, how much can I invest in your round?" And then we actually didn't have enough space in the round because we didn't want to take up like too much equity, right? Because we were already getting a large like portion of capital from Initialize, and we were getting reinvestment from Consensus. And so he was like, oh, I want to put in this much. And then we were like, oh, no, we have to shrink it down a little bit. So he's like, this is literally the least I've ever invested in a startup. So we felt a little bad for him, but I'm sure he'll be part of future rounds. But that was literally our involvement with Pomp. We had one call with him, and then he was in. And from there, he's a super helpful guy and understanding like what's happening in like the macro environment, and like also how to build a product and really get like the word out there about it. And so he's been incredibly helpful for us in that aspect.
I think overall, so far, at least one of the key takeaways I've taken from talking to you is how important just the people that you're around and the network that you have around you are in terms of your growth, not only for your business, but also like what you want to be solving, that kind of thing. Like your decision process on being a Consensus in Waterloo and realizing that, oh, more like-minded people are in Toronto for the idea that I want to be solving to make that switch. And even now, like knowing, oh, okay, like if we really want to scale and grow our business, well, we have to go to San Francisco because that's the place where I need to be. That's where the people for me to make the next step, that's where they are. And I think it just goes back to the importance of your environment. I've talked about this with other founders before, but the people that you're around, the content that you're consuming are so important for your growth. Again, as a founder and just personally too. And I think you're a massive example for that. So moving forward in 2020, I want to talk about kind of your pivot and the difficulties that might have come from this. And I think I would say I'm a normie, but I think like as someone like you who's in the industry, like there's, I mean, even just looking on Twitter, like there's a lot of backlash going both ways of, people who are like Ethereum believers and people who are kind of like Bitcoin believers. So could you kind of like talk about that and maybe like the polarization that's kind of like involved? Because I think it's kind of unique to crypto. I guess you could see some of it, like maybe like Android versus Apple, but I think in terms of this case, you have people that are really hardcore on both sides and how that kind of impacts how your business is kind of run.
Yeah, I think you have polarizations like generally that occur like in a lot of different industries. Like you mentioned, like iOS, Android. I think like Republican, Democrat. Like there's polarizations that exist like in every industry. I think in our case in particular, you have a situation where you have people in the Bitcoin industry that have been there since 2010. They saw like the creation of Bitcoin, and they saw they saw like what was involved in the process of it. And then I think really what it comes out of is Bitcoin has a certain sets of like beliefs, right? If Bitcoin, the idea behind Bitcoin is like don't trust, verify, right? Like if in the existing system, you have to trust like a third party to do anything. Like I want to send money, maybe I send it to you through PayPal. I'm trusting PayPal to do that. Bitcoin is trying to create like an entire platform where people are able to send money without and being able to easily verify it without being without needing to trust a third party. Ethereum, but I think the challenge with Bitcoin is that like it moves slowly, and so like people are very conservative. Like if you're building money, you can't have that money change a lot, right? Like I mean we're experiencing this today with inflation, right? Like the value of our money is going down with the money printing that's going on. Like with any monetary system, it needs to be a solid foundation. Now the view of like in the Ethereum community is more that we should build like networks where people are able to build things easily, which is how like Ethereum came about. Back in the day, Vitalik was like trying to work on things with Bitcoin. He wanted to build more with it. He wanted to build like what was called color coins, which is just like tokens on Bitcoin. And the Bitcoin developers didn't like it at all. They wanted it to be Bitcoin only, like Bitcoin to be the only currency, like Bitcoin is king. Meanwhile, like Vitalik just wanted to go and build more things. And so like Vitalik and of course the founding team of Ethereum went out and they built Ethereum. They had an initial like pre-sale for it. And people got on board and wanted to build more things with it. But the Bitcoin community has never really looked like favorably on Ethereum. And I think the reason why is because there's this concept of like a Bitcoin culture fit is kind of the way I like to describe it, where things that involve like printing money, so Bitcoin is like obviously like there's a 21 million cap of Bitcoin that like there's only 21 million that will ever exist. Whereas in Ethereum, they're fine printing more Ethereum, right? Like there's no cap on it. So I think like really what happens here is like you have, and I think it's really a difference between like, I don't know if you're familiar with like Austrian versus Keynesian economics, but essentially the ideas between these two camps is one says that like money should, like things should be scarce, and you should like the monetary policy should be set in stone, which is what Bitcoin is. And in Ethereum, it says things should be more fluid and more simple, and more not more simple, but more similar to the existing financial system. And we're fine with taking like shortcuts and having like, this centralized party here or this centralized party is here, as long as overall it's fairly decentralized and people are able to access it, just with an internet connection. So I think that's where really like the two different camps live. And a lot of Bitcoiners just see like Ethereum as like a reincarnation of the existing financial system, and they're trying to build something different. And so I think that's where like that polarization comes from.
Taking what kind of Atomic Loans was built off, I don't know the intricacies of it. So I think, was it built off of the Ethereum blockchain? Was that?
Yeah. So what we did actually was, so at the time, like before that, I was working on like atomic swaps between Bitcoin and Ethereum. And so the idea there was, hey, how can we swap from a Bitcoin asset to an Ethereum asset without an intermediary in the middle, without having an order book, without having the exchange, without having to give custody away. And what we did actually with Atomic Loans was we built on top of that, saying, hey, what if we're able to use a similar locking mechanism for locking that Bitcoin, and we can go and lock that on the Bitcoin chain, and then essentially we can have a lender that lends out a stable coin. And for those that don't know, a stable coin is just a token on the Ethereum blockchain, or the token in general that basically either represents like $1 or $1 Canadian, whatever it is. And so we had, the idea was to have lenders basically give out these stable coins and allow for people to get access to it. And what was novel about this was that before, like, one of the challenges with Bitcoin is it's very difficult to work with. The scripting language is very limited, and that's it's not a bug, it's a feature, as they like to say. But it means that it's very difficult to work with. So if you want to build like Bitcoin-backed loans, just with Bitcoin directly, like it doesn't have the scripting capabilities to be able to do that effectively. And so what we wanted to do was like do a hybrid. So we said, hey, a lot of people are using stable coins on Ethereum. Let's allow people to lock their Bitcoin on the Bitcoin chain and be able to get access to Ethereum stablecoins so that they can do things in like the DeFi environment. And so that's really where we got started. What I think one big mistake that we did like in the process was we didn't do enough like customer research. So I'll give you an example. Like for the product we're doing right now, we literally did like 50. We talked to like 50 different like potential customers in like that are in a particular like customer segment to learn about like what are their problems today and like what like what issues do they run into with their Bitcoin to be able to like have a really good understanding. For us, we took this from more of a technical perspective, which I think is a fault of like a lot of people in the Ethereum industry and saying, hey, like this is being done really well in Ethereum. Let's see if we can just bring this to Bitcoin. So it was a very like simplistic approach, but I don't know, like it definitely wasn't like the right approach to take from like a business perspective.
What made you realize that you had to make this kind of pivot from the loan system that you had to what you're working on now, like starting with atomic odds and moving forward? Like what was that kind of that click that made you think, okay, we have to pivot because this is the better way forward?
Yeah, so I think it was two things. I think it was a couple of things. So number one, we really weren't getting the traction we wanted to see, like as much as we wanted to with atomic loans, and I think partly that was because the actual like user experience of it was very difficult to utilize. You literally needed to have like a Bitcoin like hardware wallet, like literally like a an external like device to be able to like use the product, which was like a really cumbersome for a lot of people. And we were really in like, between a rock and a hard place. Like we had like Bitcoiners didn't want to use our product because it included Ethereum, and Ethereum people didn't want to use our product because they were fine with like, custodial wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum. And so it was a situation where we were like, we weren't fitting into either camp. And so that was part of the reason. Another part of the reason was things were really moving in a direction in Ethereum that we really didn't like. So if you remember, some people might remember back in 2017, the ICO boom of like Ethereum, which basically what an ICO is, it's this initial coin offering. And so what happened was all these different companies started like printing new tokens to like fund whatever their new idea was. Like, we're going to bring electricity to Africa, and they print a token, right? Like just like ridiculous things. And all those tokens, 2018, like most of them went to zero, for God's sake, like some of them survived, very few of them, and most of them went to zero. And what was happening at that time in the decentralized financial like realm in Ethereum was the token craze was happening again. So you had all these companies, like legitimate companies that I really respected for the past 2 years. Like there's one called like Compound that allows you to, it's basically like it's kind of like a banking system on Ethereum, but allows you to like lock, any asset as collateral and get another asset as a loan, basically, right? So like, collateralized debt agreements. It allows you to create them really easily. And all of a sudden they're saying, hey, guys, guess what? We're going to create a token for the purpose of governance. And like really, there was no need for this token to be created, right? It was really just to like pay off the investors at the end of the day, in my opinion. And a lot of people are going to argue with me in the Ethereum community about this, but that's kind of how we saw it. And so we really didn't like the direction that things in Ethereum were going. And they were also, what they were doing is they were incentivizing people with these tokens to get them to provide liquidity. So these tokens, like these projects literally went from like, maybe they had $100 million in total value locked. They start printing these tokens. Now all of a sudden they've got like, $1 billion in total value locked. And it's, in my opinion, it's fake growth, right? Like it's, you're incentivizing people for the short term to get liquidity onto the platform. And so we realized if we wanted to compete in this arena, we would have had to like, print our own token. And that really just went through against all of our beliefs in like what we were creating. And it goes against really like the Bitcoin ethos as well. And we just decided to, as a team, I literally remember we sat down there, and I don't know if you guys, like, if you've seen this, like, Start With Why, Simon Sinek.
Yeah.
You've seen it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you think of that? Like, Start With Why. What did you think of the video?
Like his TED Talk or
his TED Talk, or he has a few videos where he like talks about Start With Why, and he does like draws the few sort of.
I love like Simon Sinek is I think that was one of the first like the kind of like in that self-help field books that I ever read. I
Yeah.
love it, like that. And like I just recently picked up the latest book that he put out. I watched a web chat that he was on. But I think it's an important ethos that applies literally to most things. I can't remember the specific graphic that you're talking about that he drew in the TED talk, but
Yeah, he drew this graphic, which is basically like in the middle, like so he talked about it like we're Apple and we build like amazing computers with the best hardware. They have the best processors. They work fast. They'll get your work done. Want to buy one? Versus, uh, we like to think differently. We like to challenge the status quo, and we just happen to build great computers. Want to buy one? You know, and so it was.
that flip.
It's that flip, right? Of like people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Hmm.
And what we realized was like what we had built with atomic loans was a solution to a what problem. It was there doesn't exist non-custodial like Bitcoin back loans. So we're going to build that. It wasn't it wasn't like we believe in like the properties of Bitcoin, or we believe in this future and we have conviction about this future. It was solving a what problem. And so we sat down there and we realized we literally sat down and we watched like the Simon Sinek video, like Tony brought it up for like the whole team. And we sat there and we talked about, what do we really believe in as a team? Like, where do we think that, like in the next like 5-10 years, what should this industry look like? And what are the tools that should be built? And what should the future of Bitcoin really be? And we realized that like, Ethereum really didn't fit in that picture anymore. And that what we really wanted to build, we always wanted to build financial tools for Bitcoin. And we just happened to be building on Ethereum in order to solve that problem. But we realized that if we really wanted to like enable financial tools for Bitcoin, like we were going to have to build them in a native manner, and it wasn't going to be easy. But that it would, like if you're building like Bitcoin, they often call it sound money. And the reason there's a lot of reason for what sound money means, but it just means like money that has certain characteristics. There's only 21 million of them. It's not changing anytime soon. No one can like come in and interfere with Bitcoin. But if we're building sound infrastructure for sound money, like we can't be building that on Ethereum, which is not like sound infrastructure. And there was a lot of there's a lot of reasons for that, including like kind of like the programming language that exists in Ethereum, the various hacks that were occurring. And so we realized that we needed to go back to our roots and really understand what was going on in Bitcoin. And that's why we decided to make that pivot to focusing on Bitcoin only. And we knew that we would have a bunch of core supporters that really believed in us, because there's this really core group of Bitcoiners that believe in sound infrastructure for sound money and want these to be built natively on Bitcoin, and they've had to compromise for the longest time. And so that's where we really came back to, and we just decided to like start with why, and that's a big reason why we made the pivot that we did.
That's so interesting, because obviously, like I'm aware. I just didn't think of that on kind of a larger scale, and like again, just looking at the kind of problem fit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's also like related to like having conviction on like where the industry is going, and so and I give the example of like Netflix. Like way back in the day, they used to like sell DVDs, and like that was 98% of their sales, and 2% of their sales was like rentals. And so like a normal person would say, hey, we're going to like focus on the thing that's making us 98% of the revenue, and we're just going to go and focus on that. But what they realized was like the future of their business should be focused on rentals, because there were higher margins. There was like way more opportunity that they could tap into. And so they decided to pivot and take like the part that was like only 2% of their business, and they decided to completely focus on that, which to a normal person makes no sense. But I think whenever you're building a startup, you need to have conviction, not only where the world is today, but where the world is going. And I think that's what we realized, is that like long term, if we're taking 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in the future, is like financial infrastructure for Bitcoin going to be a hybrid system that's between Bitcoin and Ethereum, or is sound infrastructure for sound money going to be built on sound money? And so like that's where it really clicked for us, and saying like this is what we want to focus on, and this is what we believe in.
Like taking a step back and just
Mm-hmm.
looking at things from a larger perspective, looking at the growth and where you kind of see things. I think we get kind of too lost on what the problem is and like how I'm going to solve it, rather than actually looking at one, like who the customer is and how that kind of solves that problem. as well as two, where the industry is kind of moving towards and what our vision and beliefs are in that methodology. And I think those are like some key takeaways that any young founder can kind of really, they have to really think of before just jumping into and then solving it at service level.
Well, and I was just going to say, like, and I think it's as well, it's not just about like solving a problem. It's like, why are you solving this problem? It's like, like what, like, why is this important to you? Because people, like, whatever you're doing, they will buy your story. They will buy like the reason that that you like believe that things should be a certain way. It's like Apple, Steve Jobs believed in the personal computer. He believed that every person should have like a personal computer on their desk, and they should be able to use that. And they should have a tool for the mind on every desk. And in our case, we believe that like every person should be able to get access to financial tools without having to give up custody of their Bitcoin. They should be able to retain the core properties of Bitcoin. Why do all these people buy Bitcoin, which has like the best the best properties in the world? It's censorship resistant. Like no one can take it away from you. There's only 21 million of them. It's scarce. And then you're going to go and you're going to put it like with a custodian where like it loses all of those properties. So I think you really like whatever you're doing, you just need to have really have conviction about it, about where it's going. And people need to know, and they need to hear like why you're doing it. I think that's essential.
What do you think the next steps are for you, Tony, and the rest of the business, going into 2021 and 2022 next year?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like where we are right now, so we that summer, last summer we had that conversation of like, why are we doing this? And then and basically what we found was like there was a lot of like kind of key technology that was being built in the Bitcoin space, key primitives that like we could utilize to be able to create financial tools. So what we started doing immediately was start like testing those out and like creating a few like mini products. So we actually created a betting product for people to be able to bet on the election using Bitcoin. That was done in a completely non-custodial manner. And so where we are right now actually is like we've just kind of wrapped that up. We've wrapped up that initial test that we did. Right now we're working on like our latest product kind of for Bitcoiners, which is for them to be able to go and be able to get access to yield on their Bitcoin using options, actually, built in a completely non-custodial manner. So that's really going to be the big thing for us this year. We've pivoted a little bit from like our initial Bitcoin-backed loans and Bitcoin Ethereum to like, hey, we're now doing an app that allows people to make yield on their Bitcoin. But like the underlying principle of building like sound financial infrastructure for sound money like hasn't changed at all. And we see this as kind of like the first step towards doing that. So that's going to be launching probably we're doing our early beta actually March and April, and then probably early May you can expect us to be live. So it'll be exciting.
And if people wanted to reach out, learn more about you, or reach out for advice, for learning, any advice on going through this entrepreneurship path, where can they find you? Where are you most active on?
Yeah, I'm most active on Twitter. I think Bitcoin Twitter is quite quite prominent. So yeah, you can reach Atomic Finance at Atomic Finance, and then I'm just on Twitter at Matthew J. Black.
Thank you so much for listening to this awesome episode of Creator Coffee Hour. I hope you learned something from this recording, because I definitely did. The world of DeFi and crypto continues to grow and become more and more relevant every single day. And it's amazing to see what people like Matt are doing within the space. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Creator Coffee Hour for weekly updates and some awesome content. To receive our episodes the instant they're released, subscribe to our Substack through the link in our Instagram bio, where you can subscribe to the email feed. Thanks again for listening. See you all next week.